Okay, so morning everybody. I'm Lucy, I'm part of the welfare team, and I'm going to be facilitating this amazing talk alongside Marcella, who's on the welfare team with me as well. We're joined today by Clive, an amazing speaker. We're really excited to have you here. And so you're speaking about cancer, motor neuron disease, its adversity and overcoming anything else in between, and your amazing story. I'm going to let you properly say your intro, but we're going to have some time at the end, just about 10 minutes for a Q&A. So if you just want to pop any questions in the box, we'll have some time to cover them at the end. But without further ado, and I'm going to pass straight over to the amazing Clive.
Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So, and thank you for everybody that's tuned in. I really welcome you, and I appreciate you giving the time to come this morning and listen to my story. If I can ask for one thing out of this talk this morning, it would just be that it gives you the chance and the ability to perhaps reflect a little. I don't like to tell myself that I'm a motivational speaker. I think motivational and inspirational are very different. I think motivation invokes some form of action, and I do believe that an inspiration is a bit more spirit-based. I think it lasts a bit longer, and I think it has the ability to touch our souls, and that's what I'm hoping to do today. And I can actively demonstrate that we do have hidden reserves of resilience that we absolutely didn't know that we'd got. I didn't know that I'd got. So that's really the purpose of why I feel so passionate about sharing my story with you today. So, as Lucy said, my name is Clive Branson. I was actually born in Northern Ireland back in 1970. I know it's hard to believe, and I'm, excuse me, I'm happily married to Victoria. Now, this lady's an absolute force of nature. I've known Victoria since I was about 13. We've been married for 27 years. Now, together, we have, get ready for this, 4 sons. We have 1 grandson, 1 on the way at the end of the month, and we have 2 granddaughters. So I often joke that we haven't got a front door at our house, we've got a revolving door, but I would not change it for a minute. It's a blessing that not everybody's got, but my family are my strength. They're supportive in every way. They totally drive me to distraction, and I do them. My boys, they range from 32 down to 16. Thankfully, only the 16-year-old is still at home, but they still come and go. They still need us, and I love it, and it's served me incredibly well, as you'll hear later on in my talk. So I'm going to take you back to 1970 now, and shortly after my birth, I suffered a brain hemorrhage. So my mom was very young. She was probably only about 22, 23. My dad was busy. He wasn't in the military. It was just that he worked for an earth moving company, and they asked him to set up offices over there. So there was no family over there. They had to make new friends. So when this happened, I cannot, as a parent now especially, I cannot imagine how scary that must have been for them. Really tough time. And it was a serious time, because following the doctor's advice, I was actually baptized in the hospital. And I think it probably 5 to 6 months before I made it home. But thankfully I did, back to mom, dad, and my older sister, Linda. She got the brains, I got the looks. She's 2 years older than me. So home I went. Now, we weren't in Northern Ireland for more than a couple of years, and we all moved back to England. So I'm going to fast forward you now to my 20s, and chronic migraine headaches had a huge impact on my life. Now, when people say, especially, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had some good employers. So I was in the Royal Air Force. I had 20 years with the Ministry of Defence. But even so, if you'd be off work and somebody would say, oh yeah, Clive's got a headache, you know, big deal sort of thing. Truly, they had no idea and an understanding of how incredibly debilitating chronic migraine can be. I mean, for me, at their height, I could be in bed for 2-3 days, no light, and not much communication, trying to keep hydrated. Really awful, really awful. And they persisted for over 2 decades. So I'm going to take you now to when I was 37, and I suffered a stroke at home. I had a headache, no surprise. I was on the sofa. I woke up, my brother-in-law was there at the time with my wife and one of my children. And my brother-in-law said to me, "Oh, you're joining us again now, are you?" And I sort of tried to sit up, and I said something to him, but it was complete gobbledygook. Didn't really register with me, but it registered with him. And he was, "Say that again." And then I sort of woken up more then. So I looked at him. I wasn't in any pain. I wasn't in any distress. I knew exactly who it was. Just felt normal, apart from a headache. And I went to speak to him, and again, gobbledygook, and that registered. I heard that, and I tried again, and I had absolutely no, my brain and my mouth were not on speaking terms at all. So, excuse me, I thought, well, I'll get up and I will get some fresh air. And I only got about 4 or 5 paces, and I collapsed, and it was in the hall by the front door, and I had a seizure. Again, can't imagine how scary that must have been for my wife, my one son, and my brother-in-law. It was the first responders that got there before the ambulance. They got the oxygen in really quick. And what had happened was a blood clot had found its way onto the main artery of my brain and switched me off. So my wife was told not to be alone at hospital. My brain started to swell slightly, and they were prepping me for surgery when whatever they were doing in between times, thankfully, it dissolved and it passed. So I had a week in hospital. I was unsteady for a while. I was in hospital with some really, really poorly people, but I recognised that it was almost one of those moments. I'd got away with it. I had a few gaps in my speech, but that came back, and I returned to work 6 weeks later, which, looking back in hindsight, it was far too soon. And I don't want to martyr myself here, but I was desperate to get my life back. It wasn't, I just thought, I've got away with it. I'm okay. I need to be Clive again. I need to be dad, husband, friend, colleague, all these things. So I went back to work. Now, it was at this point, the hospital, excuse me, the hospital had given me a mixture of cocodamol and paracetamol tablets, something that I'd not had before. There were 30 milligram cocodamol, and there were 100 milligram paracetamol, and they were soluble. I, with absolutely no exaggeration at all, took at least 10 to 12 of these things every day, 7 days a week. Wouldn't matter if I was at home doing nothing, watching telly. Doesn't matter if I was at work. And this was, in my mind, keeping me going. This was the thing that's why I could go to the meeting. That's why I could go to work. And I very, very quickly became totally addicted. Now, it was only in 2016, almost 10 years later, something had to give. My repeat prescriptions were just flying through. I was never pulled in. I was never put in front of the GP. The pharmacist used to look at me a bit funny sometimes when she'd give me the industrial size carrier bag full of tablets, and she'd be thinking, "You collected these probably 10 days ago. What are you selling them?" But I knew that I did not at any point have the willpower to do this properly. I couldn't sit with the GP and say, "Can you reduce the prescription, etc." So I decided to go cold turkey. And obviously I don't condone this, but I booked a day off work. I needed 2 in the end. This is going to sound a bit like something off a scene off Train Spotting, but I was sweats, hallucinations. I was in bed. I had 48 hours, and it was horrendous. But I got them out of my system. and I haven't taken another one since. I'm just going to go back to 2008 now and explain the stroke. It was 12 months after it happened. And in the investigations while I was at hospital, they discovered that I'd got a hole in my heart, which was a complete surprise to me. I've been relatively fit. I did a bit of amateur boxing, been in the RAF, never had a sniff of a problem with my ticker at all. Absolutely nothing. So they found out and they discovered that I'd got this hole. So it transpires that you can have a defect from birth, and it can be a 2-3 millimeter hole, and you'll never know anything about it. But mine, I don't do anything by halves. Mine was 12 millimeters. So they imported a 14 millimeter device from the USA, get me, and they implanted this. It sounds very dramatic, but it was all keyhole. And I've never, ever had a problem since. They check it every couple of years, but that was the reason why I had the stroke, and it was fixed. And I think they call the system that they use to close it a PFO. So now it's 2017, and my dad is suffering from Parkinson's disease and ultimately dementia. So for a lot of us, our dad is our hero, right? He was absolutely no different. For me, he was born in 1937. He was obviously from another generation, doesn't talk, doesn't tell you he loves you, you know, but what a straight goer, you know, worked all his life, straight as a die, and in his own way, a very loving man. So probably 4, 5 at the most years after he retired, he started to get some minor shakes, and then his gait changed, and he was very quickly diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and it was an incredibly torturous period of time for him. And my mum and dad got divorced when I was 10, but my dad had a partner, a lady that he'd met in France, and they were together for 35 years in the end, and she cared for him right to the end, and she should have a medal the size of a frying pan, to be honest, because she she was just unbelievable. But it was very difficult, very, very difficult. Now, during this period, I personally was experiencing some mild weakness in my left foot and my ankle. So I would be walking Alfie to school, and I would feel my ankle would all of a sudden just, no pain, no discomfort, just go floppy, and I'd think, oh, I'm going to go over here in a minute, you know, if I'm not careful, and I'd shake it off. But then it went from sort of being every sort of once a week to every other day to almost a daily occurrence. Now, due to the headaches, I was already seeing my neurologist, a guy in Stoke. So I thought I need to mention this to him. I'd had an MRI on my back, on my neck, to make sure that there wasn't a mechanical problem, and there wasn't. So he did some rudimental tests on my muscles, which I didn't really understand, but he was pulling and pushing and looking at my muscles, etc. And to be honest, it was the start of a really frustrating period, because I would go once every 6 months but get no information. And I didn't realize, but what he was actually doing, of course, was trying to eliminate certain things. So I went through the process, and I would ring my wife after the appointment and say, oh, you know, no information, sorry, well, I'll be back in 6 months' time. But then it got to the point, and I have to say it was probably about 2 years. And I don't know what I was expecting from the guy, but some eye contact would have been good. And he was shuffling his papers, and he said, Clive, I'm going to refer you to Oxford. And I said, okay, Oxford, is there a reason for that? And he said, yes, it's because it's the Centre of Excellence for Motor Neurone Disease. So, of course, that really didn't register. And I thought, motor neuron disease, Stephen Hawking, goodness, it sort of washed over the top, really. But I did have the presence of mind to say to him, are you sending me to Oxford because you don't know whether I've got motor neuron disease, or is it because you think I have? And he's shuffling his papers. Oh, no, it's because I think you have. And you must understand that if you have, there's no treatment. There's nothing that we can do for you. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. So sort of I left there, and I'm wandering back to my car, and I'm thinking, well, I can't really ring Vicky now. I can't tell her, can't sort of mention motor neuron disease while she's at work. And I drove home, and I discussed it with Victoria, but to be honest, it was just a case of I was going through a process. This was something else that was going to be looked into, and they would move on to the next thing. So the appointment for Oxford came through very, very quickly. And Victoria came with me there, and they put me on a bench, and they did a few rudimental tests again, very similar to what the neurologist had done. But of course, they'd got 2 years worth of nerve study tests, MRI scans, all these different things in front of them. And it was within about half an hour, they said to me, Clive, we're sorry to tell you, but you do have early onset motor neuron disease. Now, my wife's sitting next to me. This is Victoria. This is the lady I've known since I was 13. Now she's in bits, and I'm thinking, that I've got to be able to do something or say something that's going to potentially make her feel a little bit better. But of course, there was nothing. Now, the people at Oxford are incredible, and the level of support that you get is incredible. But we left there, and we were walking around the hospital, and we were thinking, where do we go from here? How do I even discuss this with my wife? How do we then discuss it eventually with our older boys? Didn't really know where to start. Now, thankfully, Victoria, being Victoria, she's the matriarch of the family, so she took the lead, and she very, very slowly and diplomatically with the children shared the information. And this was important to me, because I didn't want this to be a taboo subject. I didn't want my older boys or any of my close friends to tread on eggshells, to if they wanted to ask me something, they were feeling a bit uncomfortable. No, that was not the way I wanted to go. I wanted it to be an open, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's great, because there's going to be periods when I want to talk about it. So that's the way we've dealt with it, and it served us very, very well. And at this point in my life, I was actually really, really busy. I'd left the Ministry of Defence, and I'd started my own small health and safety consultancy. And looking back, perhaps there was some certain flags raised, and they were not ignored, but they probably weren't recognised. My concentration wasn't what it was. My patience certainly wasn't what it was. And I began to struggle. And very, very quickly, and this is a really important point, very quickly, I became totally crippled with anxiety. Now, if you'd have said to any of my friends or my colleagues over the years, Clive, do you think there'll be ever a time where his mental health will be compromised? They'd say, you must be joking. Clive's the guy that we go to if, we've got a problem, or in the meetings, or whatever it was in any walk of life. I was not considered to be that guy. But this demonstrates that it can be any guy or lady, trust me. So the anxiety gripped me, and I went from being in the car a lot to being not driving at all, to being in the lounge, to being in the bedroom, to being in the bed, to being under the cover. And I could not and would not see anybody, couldn't even see Vic. Absolutely terrified. Terrified's a strong word, but if I can explain to you that when it was raining, like it is in London today, I would think that the roof was coming off my house. And I could see it. I could feel it. I could hear it. And I was terrified, and it was going to happen. And that was the level of my fear. And eventually, the crisis team was called a number of times, and I suffered a mental breakdown. And I became absolutely convinced that my loved ones would be so much better off without me. Now, suicide's an incredibly difficult topic to talk about, obviously. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I didn't try to commit suicide, but when I tell you that I was convinced that my family would be better off without me, that's exactly where I was. that's exactly my frame of mind. If I'm a burden now, if I'm a problem now, what on earth is it going to be like in 4, 5, 10 years time? And I was taken into psychiatric hospital, where I remained for 10 weeks. Scary place, really scary place. Probably for a couple of weeks, I didn't know where I was, didn't really register. But I slowly then went through a whole range of emotions, from being scared to being confrontational. And of course, through this, my wife was visiting me, and I had no perspective. Perspective is our superpower, and I'd lost it, absolutely lost it. So it took, I would say, at least 3 to 4 weeks before I very, very, very slowly started to recognize that, hang on a minute, that's my wife. That's Victoria. She needs me. We're a team. I've known this lady since I was 13. She's now got to leave here, this place that's noisy, scary, unpredictable. And then she's got to then get in the car, go home, and do all the normal mundane stuff. She's got to look after the family, the home. Wow, I need to get back on that team. And the perspective started to seep back into my mind, but it was focusing on her and recognizing and feeling the love that brought perspective back into my life. Hospital, however, and this is really strange saying this out loud, hospital became my safe place. I got to the point where I was allowed to go out into the fields for an hour, then I was allowed to go home for a morning, and then I was allowed eventually to have an overnight stay at home. And it was beautiful and amazing. But I needed to know that I was going back to safety. And to this day, I don't fully understand it. I don't pretend that I do. Might be a responsibility thing, I don't know. But going back to hospital definitely made me feel safe. And it was the fact of returning back to everyday life that was a bit scary. Of course, that waned, and I was eventually allowed home, where, you know, the love and the support was just incredible. But crucially, yes, I'd lost my income. Yes, I'd lost my confidence. But the crucial bit is I'd lost my identity. You know, I'm all these hats that I wear throughout my life that I'm blessed with. All of a sudden, I thought that they don't fit anymore. You know, he's talking to me, but he's thinking something else. She's talking to me and she's worried about what she's going to say. And I had to find myself again. I had to find my place in this family. And this is exactly what I did. There was nobody in the house. And I was sitting there, and I'd lost my driving license for a period of time. And I can actually cycle a lot better than I can walk. I'm mobile and I can walk with a splint. But if you cycle and there's no inclines, it's very easy. So I actually got a pad and a pen, and I wrote out 12 notes saying, hello, my name's Clive. I'm looking for some gardening work or some light maintenance work, and my number. And I dusted my bike off, and I cycled within a mile radius of my house to the very poshest, nicest houses I could find, thinking, well, he's not cutting his grass and she's not cutting her grass. And unbelievably, half of these people rang me up, and I'm still helping them today. And I would not be without it. It's just incredible being outside in the fresh air. And yes, you know, you have things where sometimes there might be things where I'm holding the hedge trimmer and I can't quite hold it properly, or I need a self-propelled mower, I can't really push it properly, and you think, oh, I'm struggling a bit. But being out there, my son introduced me to the world of podcasts. I listen to music, certainly not the 16-year-old's music, because that's not music. And I absolutely love it. It gives me so much. You know, nature has no rules. And yeah, I've reduced my time. I used to go every day. Now I go every other day. But it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So it's 2019, and my father passed away from lung cancer. Carl, he was a real strong guy in every sense of the word. And we actually took him to hospital with an issue with his back. And it transpired that it was a tumour in his back. The primary issue was in his lungs. And from that appointment, he passed away 6 weeks later. A big loss, a big loss for the whole family. So 2019 wasn't finished with me yet. I've been listening and hearing on things all the time. When you're approaching 50, it's a good idea to get your PSA count checked. Now, I had absolutely no symptoms from prostate problems at all, none at all. But I give blood on a regular basis. And I said to the GP, would you mind adding this PSA count to my latest blood test, please, because of all the reasons I've explained. He says, oh, absolutely no problem. Have you got any issues? No, none at all. I just want to check this. Never done it before. Giving blood often is quite ironic because I'm horrendous. I'm the flaker. But we did that. So I get a call a couple of days later. He said, Clive, please don't worry. Your PSA count is so low. It's 3.2, but the 0.2 has triggered a process, and we now have to refer you to a urologist. So don't worry, but there's nothing I can do about it. Don't worry, just go and explain it. It'll be a process, and that's it. So the appointment came through, went to see the urologist, and he said, I'd like to do an MRI scan. Okay, no problem. Did the MRI scan. Went back to see him. I think we should be doing a biopsy. Okay, had the biopsy, went back to him, stage 2 prostate cancer. Didn't see that one coming. Did not see that one coming at all. So it was the first thought, the very first thought was, because Charlie, my middle boy, sounds like I've got hundreds of children, doesn't it? Was with me. And I said, Charlie, how on earth am I going to go back and tell Vic this one? And he said, no, mom will be fine. She'll be fine. And it was crucial to me right from the get-go that I'd got to find a positive way forward right from the start. And I said to the urologist, Doctor, me and you are best friends. You're my man. You're going to take this prostate out. And he said, Clive, you need to slow down. I've done it thousands of times, but I've never done it on anybody with motor neuron disease before. So come back in a fortnight. Came back in a fortnight. He said, Clive, Oxford, past colleagues, other surgeons around the country, nobody will take this prostate out. Now, motor neuron disease is very individual disease, and it's different for absolutely everybody. And if you've got an aggressive version, unfortunately, it stays aggressive. It doesn't slow down. Similarly, if it's slow, which mine clearly is, it doesn't speed up. What they were worried about was it's a more invasive operation than I perhaps first thought to remove the prostate. And they all worried that there's muscle groups around your pelvis and your bladder and all these other areas that might not recover because of the MND, because they're weak and they're strong. Now, if we start doing this surgery, which requires quite a bit of recovery time, we're not prepared to do it. We could compromise your quality of life. So I had quarterly blood tests. I had annual biopsies, and I actually went for my latest consultation yesterday, where he had done an MRI scan. It's still isolated in my prostate, but it has grown. So he's now saying that we've got to do some treatment. So he's given me some options. I'm going to go back. Again, it'll be about 2 weeks' time, and we'll be going forward with either some radiotherapy or something that's called brachytherapy, which I'd never heard of. But it's just purely for your knowledge here, that it's more people should know about this. It's a much less invasive surgery, and it implants radioactive seeds into your prostate, and it kills it off over a period of 6 months. So at the moment, I'm thinking that's the way I'm going to go. So now it's 2020, and my mom passed away from COVID complications. Another force of nature, this lady, for so many reasons. Tough lady, brought my sister and I up mostly on her own, worked really hard. But she was a chain smoker, my mom. And through that, she developed something called COPD, which is a pulmonary disease of the lungs. And it got to the point where, I mean, over the years, Linda and I had been into hospital with her so many times, and she'd only have to catch a cold and she'd be in hospital because her lung capacity was really small. But she was always going to beat it. She had a twinkle in her eye. She was trying to flirt with the doctors, you know, laughing and joking. She was a superstar, really. And we always said if ever she caught COVID, she'd really struggle. She was in an assisted living apartment area, and they kept COVID out. They did a fantastic job. Now, what happened to Mom? She caught a chest infection. They called her into hospital, and she beat the chest infection, and they sent her home. She gets a call 24 hours later to say, Sandra, really sorry, but we should have given you a course of antibiotics intravenously. Would you come back? So she went back in, and she caught COVID, and she passed away 4 days later. She was in an isolation room on an isolation ward, and Linda and I were allowed in one at a time, and it was very different. She'd lost that fight, she'd lost the twinkle in her eye, and we knew we were saying goodbye to Mom, and that's exactly what happened. So it was awful, and of course there are many cases around the country and around the world with similar cases. Really difficult time. And at this point, I just want to touch on the word trauma. Trauma is actually a Greek word, and it means wound. Now, like any wound, it will need treating at some point. And it doesn't matter if it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or last week. My advice to you is don't bury it. Don't think that with the passage of time it'll just dissolve, because it won't. You really do need to put some light on it. You need to find somebody that will give you a good listening to, because it will not go away. Similarly, depression. It got me thinking about depression and the word, and what are we keeping under such strain? And that could be guilt, fear, hate, could be anything. But do not bury it. Address it. Talking about it is absolutely crucial. And not everybody's got the blessing that I've got of a large family, but we've got friends, we've got colleagues. There'll be somebody that will be understanding and willing to listen, and it has enormous benefits, enormous. So here I am, and I'm thinking, how can I be productive? How can I be positive during the next chapter of my journey? Now, this happened 2 summers ago, and I was sitting on a wall in somebody's garden, a sweaty mess, feeling sorry for myself, thinking, I'm not going to wait until I can't do this anymore. And I just thought, do you know what? You play to your strengths. I've just about still got red hair, always had a big gob. It was obvious to me, and I got my phone out, and I'm horrendous with technology, but I got my phone out and I genuinely Googled how to become a public speaker. This then introduced me to the world of speaker bureaus. I didn't know what a speaker bureau was. And right there and then I Googled the top 10 bureaus in the country, and I just dialed them. Had absolutely no idea what I was going to say. And some of them were, okay, Mr. Branson, that's great, leave your details. But some of them were interested. And all of a sudden, within a couple of months, I find myself on the roster of some bureaus. And I share my story as I am today. But that was my determination to not wait, not to sit and allow my vulnerabilities to fester. I was absolutely adamant that my family and my friends deserve to have the very best version of me. Now, maintaining a positive mindset requires patience, it requires understanding, and it requires honesty. And when I talk about honesty, I mean being honest with ourselves, looking in the mirror and genuinely being honest with ourselves, how we feel and what our intentions are. And we have to accept the realization that we live life on life's terms. And this is a big one for me. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to back ourselves. If you believe in yourself, you've got far more chance of somebody else believing in you. Back yourself, believe in yourself. Now, there's fortitude and resilience that my journey has instilled in me, and it reminds me every day that I love and I am loved. Now, it's not that long ago I was far too big and cool to come out with a statement like that, but I hold it dear. I hold it dear. I love and I am loved. And I learned that surrendering to your vulnerabilities is genuinely one of the most liberating things that we can do. We all feel vulnerable at times. There's lots of us that pretend that we're not, but surrender to them, explore them. Don't think you're the odd one out. And all of a sudden, when you're feeling vulnerable, it's not quite so scary. And I'd like to share with you some tips that may provide some assistance with you along your own journey, because they worked for me. And the first one I always talk about is the fact that an effective bridge between despair and contentment is a good night's sleep. Sounds a little bit obvious, but your sleep is really, really important. It's actually a neurological fact that a tired brain focuses on negative thoughts, and it interrupts everything, doesn't it? You feel ratty, you have no concentration. If there's something that's interfering with your sleep, or if you feel that you can improve your sleep pattern, I would urge you all to do it. Music is of course a therapeutic time machine. Isn't it wonderful? It triggers memories, good, bad, or indifferent. And I listen to all range of music. Back in the day when I was younger, unless it was Paul Weller, I wasn't listening to it. But now, as I said earlier, definitely not Alfie's noise. But no, it's beautiful. Music is really helpful. And this is a big one, and you'll hear this all the time. But time is the most valuable currency of all. We don't get that back. It's great to have aspiration. It's great to have ambition. Of course it is. That's important in your career and in your life. But don't forget today. Don't forget now. Don't forget what you're doing now. There might be an opportunity for you to tell somebody that you love them. Do it. Do it. And treasure it. We don't get it back. Make the absolute most of it. Now, I fully accept that I am a one-man drain on the NHS. There's no denying that. And whilst this is sure to continue, it definitely will not slow me down. It absolutely won't. So I really, again, like to thank you for your time, for listening to me today. Now, this is going to make me sound a bit like I'm Billy Big Bananas, but I have a website. I only have a website because my son's best mate does it, and he did it for me. It's www.clivebranson.co.uk. You can see me on there. There's a contact page on there. You can follow me on Instagram on Branson Clive. I'd love any of you to follow me on there and see what I'm up to. But thank you for your time, and hopefully, as I said right at the start, if this has given you the ability to reflect a little bit and feeling a little bit inspired, then I've done my job. Thank you.
Oh my God, Clive, what a story, what a journey that you've been on. I'm feeling so inspired by you as well. I'm a Paul Weller fan as well. So when you said that, I was like,
brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Can I just say, and I'm really sorry to interrupt, but everybody needs to hear this. This is a two-way street, Lucy. I get an awful lot back from this. People like you and your colleagues giving me the opportunity to share this story really does. I am gardening this afternoon, but I'll have a smile on my face, and Paul Weller will be in my ears. I'll be pleased that somebody probably half my age is happy with Paul Weller as well. But thank you. It's genuinely a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some comments people have been, resonating with you going through similar things. I wanted to ask myself. So yeah, I really love the way you spoke about trauma, and it being a wound, and you absolutely do, not to squash it, and to
Sure.
shed light on it. Did you find, was it just you found speaking to family, friends, or professionals? What kind of really helped you with it?
Do you know what? It was friends before family.
Okay.
And that might be because it was a bit more too daunting and a little bit too scary. And I'm also very wary that sometimes I don't like to talk about perhaps the more profound stuff with Vicky or the older boys, because I worry about the effect that they're going to perhaps be all buoyant with me, but then go away and feel a little bit sad. So I actually used a very good lifelong friend of mine. He didn't know what was coming, and we met, and it was a lot easier. He knows me very well. I know him, but he's obviously one step removed. So I found talking to him really, really helped. And then it was my brother-in-law, who's like my best mate, and he really got it. He did. And then it was my family. So I think the key was to make sure it happens, make sure you do have that chat, because once you do start talking about it, you then have the confidence to talk to others and to talk more. It's crucial, Lucy. It's really, honestly, there's traumatic periods of people's lives that they perhaps don't realize it's caused trauma. So talking about it will dissolve it. It will help.
Yeah, totally. We're the biggest advocates for that, and something that I absolutely champion. Talking is everything, really is everything. It's, it's therapy's everywhere, I always say, but yeah, talking is the best medicine, definitely. Oh, you're on mute, Mars. Oh, Mars, you're muted.
Do it every time. Apologies. I did have a question, and then you answered it, because it was all about what's your coping strategies, because through your life, and obviously you were hospitalised, but you've had so many things just thrown at you. And then obviously you discussed like the sleep, having good sleep, music, and how time is just invaluable. And someone once gave me the analogy of you've got two speakers at your ears, and you've got to, wind down the volume of all your stresses and turn up the amplifier and listen to music, get out into the fresh air and enhance yourself with all the good things. But similarly, I can't say that word. Like Lucy said,
I've got you.
Like Lucy said, I just love how you are open and honest about being vulnerable. And we're very much advocating, removing the stigma. Just reach out, whether it's family, friend, whether it's we have mental health first aiders that we train through the charity, and it's just like, show that vulnerability, and it would be incredible the amount of people who are open to listening to you.
Yeah, marvelous. Thank you very much. No, it's not easy, is it? It's not easy to put light on your vulnerabilities, because who wants to feel vulnerable? Particularly maybe in a work situation, you might think, I do an awful lot of visits to prisons. I do it on a voluntary basis, and I go all over the country, and I talk to all, every range of prisoner. And I don't just do the prisoners, I do the staff as well, talk to the staff as well. And when I talk about vulnerability there, some of the guys were saying, I can't be vulnerable in here, Clive. The minute I leave here, when I'm back on the wing, if I show vulnerability, that's game over. And I said, no, it's in you. It's in you. You explore your vulnerability. You don't have to appear to be a different person, but you will become a different person. It will happen, because the noise in your head will definitely, as you say, will turn down. explore it, think about it, and it's not so scary. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed, don't we? You know, I certainly have moments where I feel overwhelmed. Maybe I've got down to do something in the garden and I'm thinking, do you know what, I've actually got to get up now, you know, what's going to happen here? And I get up in a slightly less dignified manner, you know, and we all having a laugh and a joke about it, but it invites the doubt and it invites the vulnerability. But what I would say to people is, when the noise gets a bit too much, the key is to focus yourself and anchor yourself and focus on the most simplest thing. It could be the chair you're sitting in, it could just be your breath, music, obviously, but just focus on one thing, and the racing that your mind's doing will slow down, perspective will come back in, and don't be scared of that, and don't think that people like me don't go through that, because trust me, I do. I absolutely do.
I think I've really taken from this as well, something I'm trying to do daily as well, Clive, is be present, because I think we're all so quick, aren't we, to kind of think of the future, the past, but actually staying a bit anchored and grounded, definitely. And we've got a question in the chat, and it said, how did your family cope?
Well, I have to say, looking back, amazingly, absolutely amazingly. Look, there's no denying how sad and upsetting and profound motor neurone disease is. But they coped by, first of all, we all collectively, all of us spoke. We had a drink, we had a meal, and we talked about it. And slowly questions crept in. My oldest son was the hardest nut to crack, because he's so, you know, he keeps it all in. But then over a period of time, I would say to one of the boys, do you want to come to the next Oxford appointment? And they got more understanding, and the whole MND community was not quite so scary. And all of a sudden, we can talk about it, we can joke about it, we can get serious about it. The whole thing, and that helped. So I have to say, it's because of the way they coped, and it's because of their strength that I'm sitting here today. Because I mean, I was in hospital with people that had no visitors at all. You know, where's their support? Where's their infrastructure? But my family, I talk about them all the time, and I'm sorry that I'm on repeat, but yeah, they coped together. Together they coped, talking, being open, being not scared to cry, and we're in a good place.
Amazing.
Clive, could I just ask, obviously, regarding the prostate cancer, I'm right in saying that there's not any statutory testing, is there, unless there's history in your family? So can you kind of give us some indication of some symptoms that maybe people might be affected with, and, you know, as a bit of a trigger to maybe go and get checked out?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's different ranges of the spectrum here. So I go for a wee a lot. My friends call me Nat's bladder, which is brilliant. I've only got to look at a glass of water and I need to go to the toilet. So that could be a sign. Obviously, if there's discomfort and you get to the point where you pass blood in your urine, obviously that's a trigger. But I would say to all the guys here, it's not the old-fashioned uncomfortable physical examination with your GP anymore. You just ask for a blood test to check your PSA count. And I would also say, do it similar to my journey, with no symptoms, with no worry and no concern. Just I was 47, I think, when I first asked for it, maybe 48 at the most. And it is genuinely just a blood test. So I would encourage anybody and everybody to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone had just popped in the chat, Paul, to say obviously men over 50 are encouraged to go to the GP, and that he went for a test last week. So someone's kind of advocating that and saying that's really great advice. So regardless of symptoms, no symptoms, would you still encourage over 50 males to go to GP and request this test?
100%, and I applaud the gentleman that's done that. I think well, I'm proof of it, because they've caught it very early. If I hadn't got the MND, I would have had, they would have done the surgery and the prostate would have been out. But the success rates for eliminating the cancer, both with radiotherapy and brachytherapy, are excellent. They really are excellent. With the radiotherapy, you have to go on 6 months hormone replacement tablets, which can knock you about a bit. He did say to me, he said, "Oh, you'll have menopause symptoms." And I said, "What?" You know, my poor wife, menopause, goodness me. So, you know, we had a bit of a laugh and a joke about that. But he said that, you know, he said, "Oh, you'll have hot flushes." So I said, "Now, come on, you are pulling my chain, surely." But you do that for 6 months, and then you go for the obviously the direct radiotherapy every day for about 6 weeks. And with the brachytherapy, you don't have any tablets. You get booked in. You're out the next day. You have to be slightly isolated for probably 24, 48 hours because of the radioactive seeds. But then you just proceed as normal, and you get checked, and 6 months later, and the success rate is fantastic. And they do that mainly at the Christie in Manchester.
I think it's so important to normalise these conversations around it, because it's still there's so much attached to it. You know, you know, the word cancer, and everyone just kind of goes, just don't talk about it. But it's I think amazing, Clive, normalising it and understanding the process, and it's just signs to look out for, and just how you know, I know it's scary, it's a scary word, but just it's the process, just it can be eliminated so quickly.
Oh, of course it can, of course it can. And the support there is fantastic, you know. And again, if it makes you feel vulnerable, doesn't matter, we're all vulnerable, you know. Don't worry, just go and get it tested.
Totally. Lovely. I think that's all the questions in the chat box.
Oh, you've got a new follower on Instagram as well, apparently.
Oh, that's brilliant. Come on, all of you now, because this gives me good kudos to my son. He's like, "How many followers have you got, Dad?" I was probably about 25. So I mentioned it, and I think I got to get these numbers up. You know, he absolutely ribs me. You know, I mean, you know, so that's the 16-year-olds.
Just quickly, where are you? Where have you got some talks planned? Then have you got some more talks planned for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I have. I've got an awful lot of the prison ones to do. I do a lot of work with the Frank Bruno Foundation in Northampton. I'm a massive boxing fan. Boxing is my passion. And there's a bit of a story which we probably haven't got time for now, but my connection with the boxing fraternity is just incredible. But I'm a fanboy, so I do a lot of work there. But no, I've got one in London actually on the 14th of November.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm doing that. That's through one of the bureaus. I've got 2 or 3 of these virtual events, which are fantastic because, of course, the Movember plans are all kicking off. So I'm fortunate enough to do a few of those. So yeah, and then I've got one in. Do you know what? I might even have one in Glasgow. But anyway, no. Yeah. Anyway, it's yeah. I'm blessed that I'm busy.
Great. It's great. It's been so inspirational, Clive. Really
Thank you. Well, thank you. And that gives me such a lovely feeling. And if anybody does want to contact me through the website, on a serious note, if anybody does want a chat or ask questions, please feel free. I'm an open book. As long as you don't want to borrow any money, you can ask me anything you like.
No loans.
No. Let's not go there.
Oh, that's amazing.
We've shared your website on the chat anyway. Someone else has also said about the Prostate Cancer Foundation being an excellent resource, so we've popped a link on there as well. And we always obviously add in our support email and our telephone number for anyone who's on the chat and would like to reach out. And we're here, we're listening. So from me personally, Clive, my dad had prostate cancer, survived, but to hear your side of the story and everything else that's been, you know, piled on, you're a complete inspiration. So for me personally, thank you so much for this morning. Really, really appreciate you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Oh, and I need to apologise for Alexa popping in halfway through. I could not believe that. I thought, oh, I can't really get up and throw it out the window, really, can I? So, you know, it's probably better than the dog trying to get through the back door.
It's this is the thing with virtual world. You know, these things happen, don't they? It didn't get in the way of your at all. I didn't notice at all. I was just like, yeah, we're all everyone's putting amazing comments, blown away. But a huge thank you again, Clive, and thank you for everyone for joining as well. And it's great they can just, like you say, pop you anything over for your contact you for your website, and lovely, or Instagram.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, I need to applaud you as well, because I see a lot of organisations that have really good policies and procedures, but they're not lifting those words off the pages to reach the people that actually need it. Sometimes it's just a badge on the gate. So what you're doing, things like this, and I'm obviously a whole raft of other things as well in the wellbeing space. Well done, you guys. I think it's incredible what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Clive.
No,
it's been great collaboration this morning, and it's all recorded, so this can go out as well when it's all ready to go.
Great. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week. I hope the sunshine comes your way, and you never know, we might meet again one day in the future.
Absolutely, totally, yeah. Enjoy Paul Weller and out in the sunshine today.
Always. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.